Well, hello, everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to Rattlecast number 110. Thanks so much for joining me. Today's guest is Vince Gotera. We'll be joining him in about 15 minutes. But before we begin, I should say that Rattle is a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit working to promote the practice of poetry. We've been in continuous publication since 1995 and are unaffiliated with any other organization. We just do this because we love poetry. And I know you love poetry, so make sure you click the like button and share and subscribe, all those things that you can do just with a click of your little mouse or your pad or whatever you're watching this on to help poetry spread around the internet, which is always what we want to do. You can also leave reviews on iTunes and things like that. Give us 5 stars. I think it's worth 5 stars, right? It's just a click. So go ahead and do that right now, if you would, please. Now, we always like to start with Poets Respond, and poems about current events. And we have 2 just amazing poems, I thought, that we published this week. And they're by Amit Majmudar about the crisis in Afghanistan and what's been going on. And Amit he was the guest on Rattlecast number 55. And he's a doctor, a working doctor, and a brilliant poet, was a poet laureate of Ohio for a while. And amazing writer. And these are 2 amazing poems, I thought. Amit can't join us today, and he doesn't like to record audio, I don't think. So I'm just going to read these poems, even though you might have already read them. But for the podcast, I think it's worth sharing and reading these 2 poems. So the first poem I'll put on screen here. This is The Migration Diary of Hala Almasi. And let's roll down and read Amit's note. He says, a refugee crisis of our own making, a botched war, an evacuation, thousands of people endangered. This poem strives to get beyond the abstraction of nameless Afghans leaving for somewhere from somewhere, and follows one specific individual as she navigates her new world. And that is his note on this poem. And let's go ahead and read it. And as I always tell my kids, I don't do voices. These are in the 2 poems we're publishing here are in different voices, but I don't really do voices. I'm not an actor type. Poems are just in my voice, so apologize for that. But let's hear this poem. This is The Migration Diary of Hala Almasi. Fish would have eaten my eyes if my eyes didn't look so much like fish eggs, little black dots suspended in jelly. My ovaries are clumps of fish eggs. I lay them one by one in foreign toilets, little red drops between my thighs, curling like ink in the water, like smoke from your mouth. Don't ask me what it was like. I have no similes for you. But you're a poet, Hala. No, I am like a poet. I think a lot about what I have lost. I wrap my head in hair like I am still bleeding from the ears. The face it frames is not the face I had back home. This face is just my likeness, and that is where the similarity ends. I have left a language in the mirror over a cracked sink in Kabul. That is why left to right reads right everything in my head. Call it mirror writing, like Da Vinci's notebooks, women's beautiful severed heads floating free among siege machines, tanks, a giant crossbow. I was launched by a crusader catapult over the wall of your city. My head with my tongue missing, my tongue with my tongue missing, my tongue missing my tongue. Apocalypse means unveiling, means stripping away, down, bare. What does it mean when the white man trying to enter me in a database asks, "Sweetie, aren't you hot under all that cloth?" The man on the bus who said what he said did not see me. He saw my average of 4.2 offspring. I am a pomegranate refugee, a dirty bomb full of placentas and human shrapnel, a mama fly baggy with maggots. I have imagined dying continuously for the past 4.2 years, so it's sweet of his hatred to imagine so much life for me, in me. I don't know whether to pat his head and tell him I like women, or point at the place where I hunger and whisper quintuplets. First, it was only a husband will make you happy, Hala. Now, only a baby will make you happy, Hala. I will be happy only if my body sleeves another body, ideally a male one. If I fled in the heat back home, I can flee in the snow out here. In this new country, I want new blessings. May the icicles in your mouth turn into fingers. May the shudder in your legs turn into a daughter. I rub my nose in old book smells all day until 5 p.m., working along each row of blossoms, a systematic hummingbird. Sometimes I'll read one slowly in a cushiony green chair, and not a single bomb taps me on the shoulder to inform me it's time to leave the country. To close my life like a book, like a whole library shuttering its eyes, left behind for someone else to burn. I have one friendship that survived, one surviving friend, I should say. My husband worries the internet will corrupt me. If you write me about my poems, friend, just know it may be weeks before I tiptoe back to this account. The risk is not corruption, it's corrosion. All this rain beats the wife out of me. My bronze skin bruises blue, oxidizes green. One day I swear the rust will lock my legs shut. Faith means defending with your fists and teeth, a name, a scarf, a particular way of bowing to the ground. And then neglecting them after the mob moves on, switching your focus to cinnamon pecans or a pot of basil. The faith whose child I am is a child in my care. There are your toys, God. Amuse yourself. Mommy's busy. My child, my oppositional, defiant child demanding I oppose and defy. Not particularly wanted, really, but no less mine for that. The woman undergoes the marriage. The woman undergoes the man's last name. The woman goes under the man. The woman undergoes the parting of her seas so the man with the staff can enter her promised land. The woman undergoes the miscarriage. The woman undergoes the man's war. The men say they promised the women nothing. The country goes under. The men put the women on a raft and say, go, so we go. Some across, some under. That was the first poem from Amit that we published this week. That was Thursday's poem, The Migration Diary of Hala Almasi. And the other one I'm just going to read maybe one of the sections, and then you can find it online at rattle.com, of course, and read the rest. But this is a different poem, and I'll read his note here. This poem is about the veterans who have returned and will be returning from our foreign wars. I remember working with many during my training since we rotated through the Cleveland VA hospital. Killing kills something in the killer. And that was Amit's note. And here's the poem. Or at least the first section of the poem. It's long. But I'm going to read the first one. This is Rodriguez. And this is Recurring Nightmares of Returning Soldiers. Rodriguez. He's upside down and turning clockwise, the same slow way Torres did when he found him hanging in the garage. A steel cable connects a house arrest ankle bracelet to a puppeteer beyond the clouds. His head is 3 feet above the Swat Valley. He knows there's a helicopter up there somewhere dangling him like a cherry over the mouth of hell. He's naked, but he's got his M27. The valley crackles awake on all sides. The dirt pops like a pond, tossing raindrops back at heaven. He's a bait goat. I can't decide where to fire my weapon, Doc. At the guys firing at me from the mountains, or the chopper I know is up there somewhere. So I curl myself. Torres used to work his abs that way, knees hooked on the pull-up bar. Beast. I curl myself up and start chewing through the cable like a rat, front teeth like a rat. I feel it fraying. These little metal threads tickle my beard. They're shooting wild, but they're getting tighter. Think of dragonflies crisscrossing, less than a foot from your ears. I think I bit my tongue last Tuesday, though I still don't know where. I should feel it, right, Doc? In the morning, if I bit my tongue in my sleep? All I know is I spat out a mouthful of blood on the sheets, and I've got this chipped tooth right here, and no money for the dentist. Got an edge like a skinning knife. I'd slit my finger open if I stroked it, clean across. And you can read the rest. The next is Chiro, and then a whole series of these dreams, recurring nightmares of returning soldiers that Amit was chronicling in his time there. So there was Amit Majmudar, who just a wonderful poet and 2 great poems about current events. His newest book, which just came out last year, and we were talking about on the show in episode 55, is right here, What He Did in Solitary. So check those out. I thought, too, we would go and do a little bit of a blast into the past. There was a big controversy on literary Twitter this week about some editor of, was it Barron magazine? And so it's just kind of funny. I think she said something about how poetry doesn't matter or something, and then there was a big Twitter or whatever, and she ended up being let go from Barron magazine, and it's just so funny that this was 6 years ago, and this was another scandal which I kind of forgot about. Here's a poem. I am Michael Derrick Hudson. If anybody remembers Michael Derrick Hudson, in 2015, 6 years ago this week, it came out that he published a poem. Let me pull up this article. This is an article in BuzzFeed. They pretend to be us while pretending we don't exist. And the subtitle is white poet Michael Derrick Hudson. His use of the Chinese pen name Yi Fen Chao was an act of yellowface that is part of a long tradition of white voices drowning out those of color in the literary world. And so what Michael Derrick Hudson did is used this Yi Fen Chao pen name and to publish a poem that wasn't being published, I guess. And then ended up being published, and then ended up being in Best American Poetry as selected by Sherman Alexie. And so he confessed to this in the back of that Best American Poetry Anthology issue. And so that became another literary scandal. And this is Sam Cha's poem in response to that. And then we'll get to today's guest, Vince Gotera. So here's Sam Cha with I Am Michael Derrick Hudson.
I am Michael Derrick Hudson. Forgive, please, my slightly archaic diction, my pluralities, my fedoral syntax, my apiary japes. I don't know any better. All of my English comes from Robert Browning or Frost. I can never quite remember which. Thus, clastigloss, fractured, not quite right, which is my complaint about the world. Have you spent any time looking at the world lately? I have. I use a microscope because I fucking love science. I look at bees and I look at flowers. These are the traditional subjects of poet scholars. The thing about bees and flowers is that they need each other and they don't have any use for me. All that gaudy architecture of vegetable love and chitinous twerk, and I mayn't live in it. Oh, pity me, marooned on this chalk-dry isle of man, I, Adam Manqué, pale macaque, eveless, crucified, clenching my futile Q-tip, my lonely pen, where brown bees murmur, but will not murmur to me. Oh, I know. I am no flower, nor was meant to bumblebee. The white men are the animals with the most venomous sting. Though we have rendered every Caesar and whale in the try-works of time, and have produced thereby a quantity of ink. Though we have named the beasts of field and sea. Though we have tasted them all, have cooked them all with molecular gastronomy, they will not pollinate me. I should have been a woman or Chinese.
And that was Sam Cha, once again, with his response 6 years ago this week to the Michael Derrick Hudson controversy. And now let's move on. We're going to take a brief break, and then I'm going to hook up with Vince Gotera, and we will be right back in just a moment. Let me put up a little bit of music here and a splash screen, and we will be right back. And we're back. Thanks so much for your patience. As I mentioned, our guest today is Vince Gotera. Vince is a professor of English at the University of Northern Iowa, where he served as editor of the North American Review for 17 years. After that, he served as a editor of Starline, the print journal of the International Science Fiction and Fantasy Poetry Association. His collections of poems include Dragonfly, Ghost Wars, Fighting Kite, and the upcoming Pacific Crossing. But his newest book, which I'll put on screen here, is The Coolest Month. It's a book, it's a play on April is the Cruelest Month. It's a book of poems written in August for the poetry prompts that go on at that time. So it's a book of a month's worth of poetry prompt poems. And here he is, Vince Gotera. Hey, Vince, let's see. Hopefully this works. The connection. Are you there? Hey, Vince, are you there?
Yeah, hey.
Okay, good. So it looked like the connection was a little slow, but I think it's better now. How are you doing today? Can you hear me? I'm gonna hang up and call.
Hello?
Hey, yeah, the connection's a lot slower than it was earlier. Let me hang up and call back. Maybe we'll get a different server. Hang on a second. I'll just call you right back. Sorry about that, everybody. Let's see. So I'm gonna let it reset, and we'll try to get Vince back. Well, let's see. So it's not connecting now. I'm gonna go. We'll go to another break, and I'll be right back when we get this straightened out. So just bear with me, everybody. Hang on a second. Let me put this back up again. And we're back. So I guess the connection was too low for video, but let me start over again, and we'll cut this through. So Vince Gotera, as I mentioned, was the editor of North American Review. He served as the editor of Starline for a while. His collections include Dragonfly, Ghost Wars, Fighting Kite, and the upcoming Pacific Crossing. And his newest book is The Coolest Month Here. And he's on the line with us now, Vince Gotera. Hey, Vince, how you doing?
Yeah. Hey, how you doing, Tim?
I'm good. Yeah, sorry for the trouble. I don't know what happened. It was good when we did a test call, but the bandwidth is too low, it says. But anyway, it's great to have you on. Do you want to start out by reading a poem?
Sure. Do you have that poem Gawain's Rat? No, wait, I don't want to start with that. Do you have that poem 2 Decades Gone?
2 Decades
that I
Gone.
sent you?
Yep, I do. Have
today?
it right here. Yeah, put up on screen for everybody, and go ahead whenever you're ready.
All right. This is a poem I wrote yesterday. 2 Decades Gone. Today, 20 years after 9/11, we are finally out of Afghanistan. But still, those 2,977 souls are missing from Passover, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Diwali, Ramadan.
Yeah, fresh, hot off the presses, 2 Decades Gone, a Hainaku sonnet. Could you explain what that is, a Hainaku sonnet?
Yeah, Hainaku is a form that was invented, maybe going on 20 years ago by Eileen Tabios. And it's a word count poem. Well, a line with 1 word, the second line with 2 words, the third line with 3 words. And so you can see it there if you still have that up on the screen.
Yeah.
And then I invented a variant, which is the Hainaku sonnet, which is 14 lines. And actually, that last couplet is still a Hainaku, but it's been squished into 2 lines to make 14.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm actually using there's a variant of my invention by Bruce Neat, where there's rhyming, and Bruce rhymes the end of the first Hainaku with the end of the second Hainaku, and then the third and fourth Hainaku, the last lines rhyme, and then the couplet rhymes. And so mine is actually using Bruce's format, though I've got they all rhyme. It's all A all the way down. But anyway, yeah. So that's from yesterday.
Yeah. So do you, this book of poems, the coolest month, the newest book, which I'll put on the screen again. That's a book that is all about prompt poems and written in a daily fashion. Do you write poems every day? Is that sort of part of your practice, or is it just usually your practice in April?
I don't write poems every day. I'm an English professor, and so I'm pretty dang busy. But I do write in April. I'll write a poem a day, sometimes more than a poem a day, and these are all from prompts, as you said.
Mm-hmm. And so let's tell us a little bit about your background as a poet. Like, how did you? I'm always curious about this, but how did you get into becoming a poet? I know we had a veterans poem. I know you were drafted and went to Vietnam. What time period did you start writing poems?
Okay, first of all, I'm a Vietnam era vet, so I was not sent to Vietnam, though I was in the Army during the Vietnam War, but they just never sent me there. So I was lucky in that respect. And I started writing poetry as a child. I was maybe 6 years old when I wrote my first poem, and I don't have that poem anymore. But I remember that I think I was in the lower grades, and it got published in the school newsletter and all this stuff. And I do remember that it was a poem about the sun, and it was in alternating quatrains and alternating rhymes. So already I was a formalist even as a 6-year-old.
Interesting. And what was it that sort of compelled you to do that as a 6-year-old and then keep up with it? Do you know what was like the driving force behind writing?
Yeah, I don't know. I remember I was on a ferry boat with my dad, and I remember seeing the sun, and this poem just started to come to me. And I didn't really write a lot of poetry after that until I was in high school, when I had English teachers who encouraged poetry writing, and then I went to college and studied poetry, and so on, and here we are.
Yeah. Well, do you want to read another poem? What do you want to read next?
Yeah. Let me read another Haiku sonnet, the poem Santana at Woodstock, 1969.
Okay.
You have that?
Yep, I do. Go ahead, whenever you're ready. It's up for
All
everybody.
right. So again, this is the Haiku 1, 2, 3, and Santana at Woodstock, 1969. Exploding, soul sacrifice, all the batteries in the world couldn't broadcast energies like that maelstrom, bass, organ, guitar. Erupting drums, congas, bueno para gozar. 500,000 fans' minds blown.
Very cool. Santana at Woodstock, 1969. Is that another new one? Relatively?
No, I wrote that in 1969. No, I didn't. I wrote that about, I don't know, 5 years ago.
So I don't know. One thing that's really interesting with you is that you're the editor of the North American Review for such a long time, and it's one of the oldest. I think it's the oldest literary magazine in the country. I think it's the second oldest of any magazine after the Saturday Evening Post. I think, if I remember that right. And
yes.
Yeah, so what was it like taking that over, and what was it like being an editor? I don't talk to editors much, actually.
Well, that was a lot of work. I enjoyed it a lot, I read probably 70,000 poems a year, something like that, and published maybe 1 to 2% of those. I might have published in a year. I might have published 100 poems. So I don't know if that math is right, but something like that. And let's see. I did that for 16 years, and then quit doing it, and after that became the editor of Starline, which is the print journal of the Science Fiction and Fantasy Poetry Association, and I did that for 3 years.
Yeah, that's a really cool project. I don't know if people, how familiar people. It's sort of like it feels to me similar to the haiku community, where a lot of the people who know about it love it, that are into science fiction and fantasy poetry. But it's sort of something that's not as well known, I think. It's a great resource. They have the Rising Award, which honors the best science fiction poetry published in the year, kind of like a Best American Poetry Anthology, but just for science fiction poetry, which is really cool. And you can pick up a copy. And if you're a member, you can vote for the winner of the award. So I think how they do it is you nominate. Poems get nominated. Correct me if I'm wrong, Vince, but and they get nominated, and then all of the members get the copy of the book, and then they vote on the winner. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah, it's just such a cool project, and such a interesting genre of poetry, which is a little underappreciated. I think we had a issue for that, a speculative poetry we call it, but just the same kind of thing. And it was just really fun reading those poems. It made me wonder why people don't write more science fiction poetry and speculative and fantasy poetry. What do you think? Like, why is it like a subgenre within the poetry subgenre?
Well, I think that people just aren't aware that it's there, and particularly that the organization is there. I know that I had been writing speculative poetry for some time before I discovered the organization. So in our definition, speculative poetry, of course, is huge, right? But when I was the editor of Starline, my definition was science fiction, fantasy, and horror, and occasionally some science poems. So I don't think I took very many of those when I was the editor.
Yeah, and I don't know. It just the funny thing is that I didn't know about it either until I think somebody nominated a poem from Rattle for that. Oh, I'm getting a lot of feedback, Vince.
Well,
okay, that's better.
It's okay.
Yeah, it's better now. Whatever happened is over. Yeah. So I was saying I didn't really get I didn't know about it either until a poem from Rattle was nominated, and then I got to explore it, and it's such a cool organization. The website. Let me tell people the website too, really quick. It's science.
It's sfpoetry.com.
That's what it is. SF poetry.com.
Yeah.
I'll put it up on screen too.
And the organization is, I said organization, or did I say organization? It's association, Science Fiction and Fantasy Poetry Association, SFPA, where the F is doing double duty for the words fiction and fantasy.
Yeah. And so what is it about, what is it that draws you to writing those kind of speculative poems, which you do as well?
Well, I've been reading and writing science fiction again since I was a child. That's really where my literary interest moved after I wrote that poem. I think I was probably, that first poem, I was probably 9 or 10 when I discovered Andrew Norton in the school library. And then, you know, it was like a whole universe opened up for me, and I wrote a little bit of science fiction per se. I mean, fiction as such, prose, and then eventually that crossed over into writing poetry. Maybe in the last 15 years or so.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's something very sort of freestyle about your poetry. And there's a way that when you're writing speculative and science fiction type stuff, there's a lot of feedback. Is there something hitting the microphone or something like that?
No.
That's strange. Okay. Anyway, yeah. So there's something very creative and free about the way you write. Like it feels almost, I don't know, like you're playing jazz or something as you write these poems. And there's something about speculation that's similar. I feel like you're playing with like your imagination in the same way. I think. How do you think those two are related?
Well, you know, there came a point, I think, in my writing where I used to try to be serious, you know, in poetry, and I just thought, well, I should be having fun, you know, and so I think that allowed me to open up and not worry so much about getting into New Yorker. I'll never get into New Yorker. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, I started to write light poems, you know, humorous poems, or I think they're humorous anyway. And then my old love of science fiction from when I was younger came back. I had never stopped loving it, but then the writing of it came back.
Well, let's hear
fantasy as well.
Let's hear another poem. What do you want to read next?
Well, let me read you a science fiction poem from the book. In the book, there are 30 poems, one for each day in April, and the poem I'm going to read is the heading is April 4th, and so I actually wrote that poem on April 4th, 2013. No, 2013. Yes. I started doing NaPoWriMo, National Poetry Writing Month, writing a poem a day in April in 2012. And when I hit 2018, I realized that I had hundreds of poems from that, you know, maybe a couple hundred. And so then I started to put together this collection, this chapbook. So this is April 4th. The prompts are in the back. There are notes in the back that explain what the prompts were that produced the poem. So here's my note in the back for April 4th. This elegy came from 2 prompts suggesting possible poem titles. Maureen Thorson suggested crafting a title from Scottish science fiction writer Ian Banks' extremely odd poetic names for spaceships. And then there was also a prompt from Robert Lee Brewer. Take the phrase, hold that blank, and replace the blank with a word or phrase and write your poem. And so putting those two together, which is what I always try to do, I try to merge the prompts. one prompt was about spaceships and the other was Hold That Something. And so it became, the title was originally Hold That Ship, but now it's called Elegy for Ian Banks. And when I wrote it, some of you may know Banks's work and life, and he was very ill with cancer when I wrote it, and then it became an elegy because he died not long after. So this is has an epigraph for Ian Banks, 1954 to 2013, Scottish science fiction writer known for fanciful spaceship names. And then another epigraph. The Irish corvette Matcha, a small warship, was dispatched to France to bring William Butler Yeats's body home to Ireland for reburial in 1948. And here's the poem. Ian waits at Forth Ports in Rosyth, where his father had once worked. He sits on a dock, dangling his feet into thick air over dark green water, where once submarines lay for repair, their blunt noses airing in dry dock. The Clipper's spaceship, Screwloose, from his novel The Player of Games, is on the way to fetch him, to ferry him to Avalon, Inisofallen, Isle of Apples, where King Arthur reposes, braced to save Albion, England, from peril. Ian squints into the gray, storm-clouded sky, uncertain from which direction Screwloose would appear, swoop in. The three-masted ship gracefully slips into dock. Ian pays not one whit of attention, still scanning the skies. Ian is surprised when the sailing ship's captain strides up, blue-plumed tricorn and tasseled epaulets glistening gold. Mr. Banks, I presume? When will you board, sir? I am master of this vessel to leeward of you. She is Screwloose. Jaw slack, Ian doesn't know what to say. He allows himself to be led onto the deck of the clipper ship. Captain McBride gives the order to cast off, weigh anchor. The sun emerges brightly from behind clouds. Standing in the bow, Ian leans into salty spray, the sea scudding and frothing as it breaks on either side of the clipper. Ian feels the cancer somehow fading away, black flakes sloughing off, flurrying away in wind. Ian recalls how he had driven today to the Rosyth docks in a bit of a frenzy. He'd imagined he would be tardy and need to sprint, yelling out for someone to hold Screwloose even as it left, or worse yet, there'd be no spaceship. Hearing a strange metallic noise, like a submarine klaxon, dive, Ian turns and looks upward at the sails on the closest mast. Someone in a boat alongside the Screwloose would have seen Ian smile, as sails harden and shift, drape a translucent metallic canopy over the deck, flare 50s rocket fins. The spaceship, Screwloose, lifts from the water and streaks smoothly up into air, deep space, the heavens.
And that was Elegy for Ian Banks from Vince Gotera's newest book, The Coolest Month. And so these prompts that are written for National Poetry Month, which is in April. And I kind of always have mixed feelings about National Poetry Month, to be honest, because it feels like it's like a hard sell, whereas poetry works a little better as a soft sell. And I don't know. I mean, but it is important to have sort of a time set aside for teaching purposes and for, publicity and things like that. What do you think about National Poetry Month? Is that something that you find is effective in introducing poetry to students and people? What do you think about it?
Well, I do. I've used, even before I started writing a poem a day in April, I had always used a National Poetry Month, to bring attention to poetry among my students, among friends and acquaintances, and so I'm a fan of it. I know that there are people who worry about it, as being sort of, commercial or whatever, and I just think that any attention we can bring to poetry is to the good.
Yeah, I guess what I feel like is that when people discover poetry, it's usually a story like yours. Like I talk to people who are poets, every week, and it feels like they all discovered poetry sort of on their own in a way that wasn't part of a school thing necessarily. Like it I don't know, it sort of lands in the right spot maybe, and maybe if you blow as many seeds as possible, it lands the most places as possible, and that's probably the case. But poetry, there's a way that it's kind of subversive. And I always I don't know, it feels a little strange to me to market it like that, like you would Breast Cancer Awareness Month or something. Do you know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah, I agree.
Let's hear another poem. What do you want to read? What are we going to read next?
Let's see. The book rather, mm-hmm. begins with an abecedarian and ends with an abecedarian, and so the poem for April 1st is called Well, let me give you the prompts. This abecedarian came from two prompts: an arrival poem from Brewer, and writing a poem that has the same first line as another poem, Thorson. So I cheated a little bit because April is the cruelest month is not the same first line. It's not a first line in the poem it comes from the wasteland. Mm-hmm. But it is probably the most famous line in that poem. And then I used it for a title rather than from my own first line. So I wrote this on April 1st, 2013, and it's called April is the Cruelest Month, or Hoping 30 New Poems Will Arrive. There's always that fear, right? That the muse will not show up. So this is an abecedarian, one word per letter. April's blood-curdling, damnable expectation for gorgeous Homeric iambics just kills limp-noodled me. No old pantoums, casitas, rondeaus, senryu, terzanels, verse. Well, Xbox, Yu-Gi-Oh, Zoloft.
That's great. That is April is the cruelest month, or Hoping 30 New Poems Will Arrive. And I love when I get a submission with abecedarians, I always kind of just skip to the last words, and they're almost always the same. Everyone's always has a Xerox and a zoo or whatever. So and it's always great to see, because those last three are the tough ones. So it's great to see interesting ones down there.
Q is a tough one too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that.
Let me read you the last poem.
Yeah, let's do that too.
On April 30th.
Okay.
And the prompt for that was write a poem. So from Thorson, the prompt from Thorson was write a poem backwards. Start with the last line, work your way up the page to the beginning. And Brewer's prompt was take the phrase, bury the blank. Right, and so the blank that I used was zombies. So the poem originally was titled "Bury the Zombies," and I wrote. Well, you'll see how. Okay, I didn't quite follow. Well, anyway, all zombies coming and going, and I'm calling this a somersault abecedarian, where you read down one column, which is A to Z, and then the same words come back in the second column, Z to A. So that's the backward. That's how I get the backward
okay.
in. All right. Again, one word per letter. All bury caskets. Dooms exhausted. Forever green, horrific, inside jujubes, kissing lips, miniature, never oblique. Plan quiet reveries. Secure trees. Under visible wound, exit your zipper. And then in reverse. Zipper your exit wound. Visible under trees, secure reveries, quiet, plan oblique, never miniature lips kissing jujubes inside horrific green. Forever exhausted. Doom's caskets bury all.
And that was all zombies coming and going. And again, I love that zipper your exit wound. What a great phrase that is. So what I wanted to ask is about this, writing a poem a day. How many years have you done the April, the 1 day poem thing during the month of April?
Well, before 2012, I would do it and then fall off the wagon,
Hmm.
and often like by April 6th, I was done, Um, and then in 2012, I said I'm just going to stick it out and really do it, and I did, and then I've done it every year since. Um, so that's what 12, so 9 years
And,
that I've
and
done
so
it.
that's what I wanted to ask about. Like, how do you? Because I think it's such a productive thing to do to try to force yourself to write even when you don't want to, and see how things can sort of pop out spontaneously. Um, but how do you keep yourself at it like on the hard days? Is there a trick that you have that you can actually keep it going? Because a lot of people do that way you said, where they last a few days or a week or so and then throw in the towel.
Well, I've gotten so good at it that it's not difficult now. I mean, I always can, the prompts are I think what makes it fun for me, because the merging of the prompts,
Hmm.
because sometimes, well, sometimes they do work well together, because let's say it's Earth Day, so both prompts will be about Earth Day. On the 14th day, sometimes they might both ask for sonnets. Those are easy days,
Hmm.
um, but that's the fun of it for me. The beauty of it for me is trying to get those prompts to elicit, a single poem. Um, and this year, or maybe a couple of years now, I'm writing a book of poems about aswang,
Hmm.
um, um, which are Philippine monsters, and um, the it's a novel in poems. There are two monsters two aswang that fall in love, and they try to they pretend to be every regular humans and live out in the open, and so anyway, that's the premise for the novel. So I was able to get a lot of those poems, probably 20 or more of those poems done in April, and of this last April.
Hmm.
And I thought I was done with the book, and then I put the book together, and I was shooting for a chapbook, and it turns out I had 40 poems, and so I thought, oh man. And so I've now gone back. I thought I was done, but now I've gone back to try to make it a full length book, and try to fill in more of the story.
Hmm.
I did cheat. The second to the last poem is in the whole thing is covers 30 years. And so I was really cheating. I was trying to get to the ending of what I saw as the ending of the story, and I crammed a bunch of the narrative into one poem. And so that's where I'm going to be expanding
And
to
so
get at least another 10 poems.
so for these poems, they're for the national poem a day thing. We're using prompts too for the poems about the aswang or not?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Oh,
So I had
interesting.
three prompts, right?
Hmm.
I had the NaPoWriMo prompt. I had, from Maureen Thorson, I had Robert Lee Brewer's prompt, and then my own theme, um, which worked out pretty well. I most days it worked out.
Hmm. And so I wanted to talk about prompts. Like, do you ever write prompts, and what kind of prompt do you think works best for poems? Because we do have I don't know if you've seen, we have a prompt at the end of every episode, and we have that as part of the open mic. And I'm always wondering, like, what works best for me, or things I think that make it easiest, or like sort of narrative type prompts that give you something you have to write about. What do you think works the best? Do you have a preference for styles of prompts, or not?
No, I don't. I just, whatever the prompt is, I just work with it. Uh, um, I suppose the easiest ones are, write a rondeau. Those are
That's
the
the
easy.
hardest for me, because I think like what am I going to write about?
Okay, okay, yeah.
Yeah. So do you ever write prompts yourself?
Um, no,
No.
no. I think I have. Well, in the sense that I'm a teacher,
Hmm.
I have written prompts for my classes, but but uh, but no, generally not. not in the same way that Maureen and Robert do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, let's see. If anybody has any questions for Vince, please leave them in the chat windows. I have open on both Facebook and YouTube, which I'm watching. And so do you want to read one of those poems? I think I saw a poem that you sent that's from that new book you're working on. Did I
Yes.
see that right? Do you want to read that so people
Yes,
can have an
sure.
idea of what you were talking about?
This was a Curdle sonnet. Hang on a minute.
Okay.
My computer locked up. Hang on. Okay. This is a Curdle sonnet, which some of you may know as the short sonnet form invented by Hopkins. And this comes from a prompt to start a line with a quotation from Plath, with a line from Plath, from the website Sylvia Plath Bot. If you like Sylvia Plath, go check that out, because you can every day it gives you a line from Sylvia Plath.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah. And so I think this might have been, anyway, okay, Aswang Childhood, this is called. And the story here is that, or the point in the story where the male in the story, Santiago, who is a were-dog, and then his wife, Clara, is a vampire, a flying vampire. And Santiago has the setting is in World War II, or from the start. The novel starts in the 30s, and they have moved to the U.S. to escape attacks from people in the Philippines, who are trying to kill Aswan, right? And Santiago has gone into the army to fight. Because his wife has been trying to get him to stop being an Aswang, and he figures out that this is a way for him to continue killing. Aswang Childhood. And the line from Plath is, "Can such innocence kill and kill?" Aswang Childhood. Can such innocence kill and kill? Tonight, Malcolm, 7 years old, his father at war. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't explain that they have a son who they're just discovering is also an Aswang. Okay. Can such innocence kill and kill? Tonight, Malcolm, 7 years old, his father at war, caught a bat in his bedroom at bedtime. I was afraid my baby would get bit, but he held it tight. I could see its fur glowing black between his fingers, and I'm almost sure it was screaming. In utter calm, with an angelic smile, my boy tore its wings off. Worst, my son's own wings then came out, trembling, as the bat died. What future deaths will come, Malcolm?
That was Aswang Childhood from Vince's forthcoming book. Do you have a title for that book yet?
Well, it's the working title is Aswang Love.
Mm-hmm. I'm so curious about that. Can you tell a little bit more just about that story, about the mythology of the Aswang?
Yeah, the Aswang are kind of a multi-purpose monster in the Philippines. Mm-hmm. You have ghouls who eat dead bodies. You have shapeshifters. You have witches. You have vampires, and they. I think that those monsters came to be a kind of creation myths for explaining things. Like, for example, the kind of aswang that Clara is a manananggal, which isn't a aswang that can split the top half of her body off from the bottom half and then grow wings, and she flies into the night and ironically attacks pregnant women and children. And I think that particular aswang may have been used to explain miscarriages. This is a guess on my part, because the aswang, the Manananggal aswang, has a long tongue let's say 10, 15 feet long, that it can insinuate into a window of the bedroom of a pregnant woman and enter her pregnant belly and suck out the fetus.
Oh, wow.
Well, that was fun. Okay. Yeah. And so the thing that interested me about these monsters is that, in the Philippines and maybe, um, maybe even in the diaspora, that you have parents who use these stories, right, to get their kids to behave. Um, anyway, what interested me about it was that when I looked into the literature, into the old stories, the stories were always about awful monsterly things, and the monsters were not the Aswang were not investigated or thought about or wondered about as beings with feelings and desires and and dreams, and so I thought that would make a great story, to told by Aswang about their real lives, their inner lives.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's always so fascinating. Different mythologies around the world and where they come from and how they come from dreams, and then they have a use and the way they're spread. That's always such a fascinating thing. I know Nick Carbo writes some poems about mythology from the Philippines, which are interesting too.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's going to be a fun book. And it ties in too, of course, with the science fiction poetry connection that you have there.
Yeah, science fiction and fantasy and horror, all three.
yeah, all combined. And I just love this stuff. And I always wonder why, poets don't write more in genre, because it's so entertaining. I actually had a series that I was working on, which I never published or did anything with. And my only goal was to be on the Art Bell, it's Coast to Coast with George Norrie. And I thought that my idea was that I would pretend it was real, that I actually was abducted by aliens, and they made me write a poem every night. And because they were trying to understand humanity. And so they would show me something, and I would have to write a poem about it, and they wouldn't let me go back to my bed until I did. And so my plan was to write this whole book about that, and then get on the Coast to Coast radio show at night, because they have like 10 million listeners. But the point though is that there are so many people who are entertained by speculative writing, and it's something that we don't really touch on. Why do you think that is?
Well, I don't know. I think that some people think of science fiction as airport literature. That they don't really understand how it's just like any great literature any literature that they might consider great. And so I think it gets pigeonholed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so too. Well, when you write this book, you should try to get on that show, because there's so many listeners, and they would, it would be the best-selling poetry book in a while, I think, if you did. And that's something that they would like. I just imagine people reading poems on that show, and I think that would be really cool. There's a question here from Robbie. I wanted to get back to other things too. And Robbie does this here. She says, what would you do or tell your students about how to write from prompts? Like what is your advice for prompt writing, since you've done so much of that?
I think that I'm not sure what I would tell students per se, but I think what I would tell anyone about it is to let yourself be flexible about the prompt. It's and both Maureen and Robert say this, that you don't have to do the prompt exactly as written, which actually I try to do, but to allow it to be a trigger, to allow it to elicit something from inside you that maybe you didn't know was there to be talked about. And so flexibility has a lot to do with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that has to do with the playfulness that you show in this too. Like you're willing to go, you're willing to go all over the place with these, and sort of take it where your amusement takes you, almost, it seems.
Right.
Do you want to read another poem? What do you want to read next?
Yes. I uh, did a collaboration, a chapbook, with Lee Harlan Bayhan, an old friend, a poet who was my classmate in MFA school. And we wrote a COVID pandemic chapbook where we took turns every day. The book is called Corona virus, and there's a sort of a poetic pun there because the book is made, or the chapbook is made of it's a crown of sonnets.
Mm-hmm.
So, one of us would write a poem, and then the other person would take the last line and write a poem from that, and or a sonnet from that, and we did that. I think there are 20. Well, we started to do doubles, and so I don't recall right offhand how many poems there are. Something like 22, or maybe 24.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll read one that I wrote. This is called "In Memoriam John Prine, Dead of COVID-19." Most days, we expect to hear from a famous author of songs loved by millions for decades, even more of his lovely music. He was only 73, John Prine, loving and loved husband and father. My daughter Amelia and I have a duo called Groovy News, and we perform a noteworthy song by Mr. Prine, Angel from Montgomery, about an old woman living with her old husband, their lives a desert of lost dreams. The song asks, how the hell can a person go to work in the morning and come home in the evening and have nothing to say? The man told us simple, unvarnished truths. COVID-19 may have taken John Prine, but in song he lives on.
The great poem, "In Memoriam John Prine, Dead of COVID-19." I remember that when he passed away, and we had a few submissions. I don't know if we published one about John Prine or not. I can't remember, but yeah, excellent and very interesting hearing the Coronaverse. I like that. You usually write in form, and it seems, I think most of the things you've read in form today anyway, and most of the things in the book are in form. Do you have a process for approaching form? Like, how do you know which form to write a poem in once you have what you want to write about? Or does the content come from the form? Or is it just different every single time? Like, if you ask a songwriter, it's kind of like the same question. If you ask, like, does the music or the lyrics come first, but is there a form? Does a form follow function, or the other way around?
Well, I really like curtal sonnets, and so I tend to gravitate towards that. But then there are other times when I'll just start writing. I often start in pentameter and then try to follow the poem wherever it wants to lead. And sometimes that's free verse, sometimes it's something else. But yeah, I do like forms, and or formal poetry. And I used to, I've done more and more of that as I've gotten older. I used to do about half and half, with free verse but now it just helps me to keep the poem going, knowing that I have to rhyme now. I have to do a certain rhyme at this point.
Do you find it's hard to go back to not using those forms?
Oh, no.
No,
not at all. I mean, I write in forms because I like it, but for example, in the Aswang book, I think there are, well, maybe a handful in free verse. Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to talk about was just your experience as an editor for a major magazine. What do you have any advice you can give for people who are being published, like from the other side of the desk? Like what were you looking for in poems, and what did you see in submissions that made them stand out, and things like that? Do you have any advice for people who are submitting and trying to get published in magazines like North American Review?
Well, my advice would be, this will smack of Polonius in Hamlet, but to be true to your own vision as an artist.
Mm-hmm.
The worst thing I find, but particularly with contests, we used to have a contest in the North American Review that was the Kurt Vonnegut fiction contest, and we ended up scrapping that because everyone kept sending. We just wanted good fiction, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we wanted to give it a name that would give the contest some weight, in tradition, and instead we got a lot of bad Vonnegut stories
Yeah.
because people thought that's what we wanted, and we just wanted good fiction. So yeah, I know it's kind of a truism to say, well, be true to yourself, but actually, that's as an editor reading, thousands of poems every year, I could tell when somebody was being, inauthentic.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's funny that you say that right now because we're in the middle of picking the winners for the Rattle Poetry Prize right now, and every year, people they tend to send their longest poem that they like. It's kind of like the standard because I think there's a sense that, it's only worth a big prize if it's a longer poem. And so we get much like the average length of a submission for the contest is about twice as long, maybe, or maybe even higher as a regular submission for the general section of their magazine. And then they tend to be heavy too. And there's not a lot of light things, and it's hard to find things that are more humorous or things that are on different topics. So a lot of times the topics are death and things like that because they're the big topics. And so what happens is that people, the winners end up being those kind of poems, like a page or like 2 pages about death somehow, or about some kind of very serious issue, and very heavy and like makes you feel emotions in a great poem. But we don't get any other poems to choose from. Almost it feels like. And the funny thing is that last year, every year I beg for people to send more variety, and more forms, more short forms, more, a wider variety of topics. And last year we finally had a whole bunch of poems, including the winner was a pantoum. We had 2 sonnets in there. And so I thought, okay, well, I don't have to beg for variety anymore. And so this year, looking at the submissions that are in our final stack, and going through the whole list of submissions, it's back to the same thing. Because I guess I do have to beg. But yes, that's just such great advice to send what you're writing and not try to tailor it to the magazine, because we're looking for variety. We don't want to see the same thing every time.
Another thing that would happen is we would always have a guest judge, right, in our poetry contest.
Mm-hmm.
And often they would write poems that I suspect had a place name that they would change depending on who they thought was reading it.
Mm-hmm.
I remember we had Lucille Clifton one time as a judge, and we got several poems about Maryland, right? Because that's where
Yeah.
she's from.
Mm-hmm.
And it made me wonder, like, was this poem actually originally about South Carolina, and instead they just changed the location?
Yeah, it's funny. I think people just overthink it a little too much and try to tailor it to what they expect instead of yeah. So that's great advice. From the perspective of just like looking at a poem, as you pull it out of the slush pile, as they call it, is there something that makes it stand out? Like what? How about this question? How far into a poem do you realize that it's good and worth close consideration? Do you think you can tell right away, or do you read the whole poem?
Tim, I know you're of course you do this as well. You do this endeavor as well. But I read every single poem. I read the whole thing, and sometimes I have to admit that sometimes my eyes touch the words, but maybe, I knew early on that it wasn't gonna work. But I always wanted to give it a chance, and I think that people or poets who are submitting think that the poem has to be perfect, in order to get in, and that's not always the case. Sometimes there may be small problems. I mean, obviously it has to be, it has to be grammatical, and everything has to be spelled right, and everything should be, if it's something that deals with external reality, the the stuff in the poem should be, almost this is like a New Yorker thing, right? That
Yeah.
if you're saying there's a fish in Lake Michigan, it better be there. But really, when I was reading for both North American Review and Starline, I looked for poems that said something interesting. Now, of course, the what people say about that is that everything has been said. Well, that's not exactly true. There are different people are looking at these ideas and so on through their own eyes, rather than the eyes of some long dead poet. And so I always looked for something that was interesting and that was not necessarily serious to itself, not necessarily about a serious topic as such, like you said, death, but that was where the poet treated the poem itself with dignity. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to put it too. Yeah, treating the poem itself with dignity. I like that. There's a question here from Vicky Miko. She says, thank you for good info, Vince. Wondering how you incorporate such detailed research to write your poems, or is everything already in your brain?
No.
Yeah.
I do a lot of research.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's all very, I guess a real researcher would say it's amateurish. I get distracted and then I end up just things that I think I need to know for the poem. For example, I researched what in that poem, the Ian Banks poem, I researched what ship captains on 3-masted ships would wear, right? What their uniforms. So I don't know that I knew the word tricorn, but that's how I found that out.
Yeah. Well, we're sort of coming up on time a little bit. Do you want to read maybe 2 poems? We'll do one poem, then one last question, then another poem.
Okay. Here's a political poem, April 10th. And what was the prompt? This sonnet I'm about to read comes from a prompt by Maureen Thorson. Write a poem that's a portrait of someone important to you, and Brewer, write a travel poem. My mother's fear. So this was in what year? 2017. So it's in the middle of the Trump presidency. My mother's fear. My mother was an alien, a legal alien. That is, she had a green card, while my father and I were the family's U.S. citizens. As a kid, I wanted to visit Mexico, but my mother was afraid. Now, she was a brave woman, a doctor, the only female in her med school class, during a time when only men could do such things. But for her, no Mexico. She was scared they would stop her at the border on the way back and she would get stranded alone. I thought that was foolish and silly, I remember. How could that happen? America was the land of the free. Well, Mama, today you'd be right. America great again. You were always right.
That was My Mother's Fear, once again from The Coolest Month. There's a question that kind of fits with that poem, just about craft again, but Carlton Johnson wants to know, how do you craft the ending of your poems? Which is interesting. It feels like some people write toward an ending that they sort of get the idea for, and then it's almost like it's like the lighthouse that they're chasing or something. And then other people, like the ending comes upon them by a surprise. Is there a way that you think about endings, and how do you figure out where a poem is over and where it ends?
I try not to know where the poem's going.
Mm-hmm.
In the middle of the poem, I might know where it's going, but when I start the poem, I don't want to know where it's going. if you want to write a poem about the Statue of Liberty and you end up writing a poem about the Statue of Liberty, who cares, right? uh, um, um, with a Swang book, that was changed because I wrote the poems not in the order of the narrative, but I wrote them, as things occurred to me that there's something that might be in their lives, and then I had to stitch in poems to bridge what I'd done. Right, one poem, set in a certain place and time, and then another poem set in a place and time, and then I had to somehow bridge those, and also keep the plot of the story going. So in that respect, with those poems, I knew what I needed the poem to do, within the context of the narrative, but I didn't always know how it was going to end.
Mm-hmm.
And so I try to surprise myself when I write a poem.
Yeah, that's good advice too. And one thing I wanted to ask you too before we do the last poem, your blog is The Man with the Blue Guitar, and you mentioned a few times in different places in bios and things that your favorite color is blue. And I'm curious, like, what is it about blue? And what, I don't know, like what is it that makes your favorite color blue? That's one of those things where maybe because of my personality type or something, I like when people ask me what my favorite color is, I just like make it up. I don't care. and so when my kids, when you have little kids, they love asking like what your favorite color is, and then they change it and they announce it like it's a big change, and it's something that it doesn't register. So what is it about blue that makes it your favorite color?
Okay. Well, I remember when I was in 5th grade, I really liked orange.
Mm-hmm.
And so it hasn't always been blue, and I don't know when it became blue, but I have a lot of blue clothes, and I have a lot of poems that have the word blue in them. And I don't know what it is about blue.
Is your daughter's middle name Blue?
Yeah, my ex-wife's name, or maiden name, is Blue.
Oh, okay, interesting.
And so all 4 of those kids have the middle name Blue.
Yeah, because we published Amanda in issue 24. So yeah.
Yep.
So what is it about the blue though? Like, do you have any? Is there like an emotion attached to it? I
have no idea.
Yeah, I think maybe I always think that maybe it's that, what's it called, the synesthesia, and maybe I just like don't have the synesthesia gene, so like there's no connection to colors. I don't know.
I'm not this synesthetic at all, so that's not what it's from.
So there goes that theory.
Well, something I would probably make up is that I love the sky and I love the ocean,
mm-hmm.
and both of those things are blue, and so no, that was BS. I just said that. I don't actually know the answer.
Yeah, that's the thing. I've like interrogated my kids about this, and they don't even know. They don't know either. And I feel like I'm missing out on something big by not having a favorite color. But
well, I'm moving these days. I'm kind of drifting over to purple. I go back and forth now.
Yeah.
It's right next door, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, not exactly, because purple is red and blue together. Violet is, well, according to Newton, it's blue and then indigo and then violet. And I love indigo. I'm not so sure it's an actual real color because Newton wanted to have 7 colors because it was a mystical number. Right?
Oh, really?
So,
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I really think that there's blue and there's violet, and indigo was even though indigo is a real thing, he made it one of the 7. By the way, different cultures, and I remember this sort of vaguely from linguistics classes in undergrad years, that different cultures see colors differently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you might have and I'm making this up now, but you might have, I'm hypothetical, you might have a culture and in their language, red and orange might be the same color. Right, might merge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's always interesting. And blue is the newest color in the English language. There's a paper that somebody came out with years ago, maybe 10 years ago, but they realized that there's no color blue in Dante maybe or something like that. And so they looked back through all of literature, to find the first appearance of blue. And people would refer to, the ink dark sea. They'd refer to the ocean as black, and they'd refer to the sky as gray, until somewhere the blue as a color was like introduced into European consciousness or something, which is really fascinating. Like I always look up at the sky and say, like, how could you think that is gray? But they used to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, anyway, let's read one last poem to close it out. Vince, what do you want to do?
All right.
But thanks for this fun discussion and humoring me with that.
Thank you, Tim. I appreciate it. So this is a poem that Gowan's Rap, I think you have it. And Gowan's Rap goes back to the 80s. I wrote this as an MFA student. And I wrote it really because, you probably remember, or some people will remember, the poetry wars, between the formalists and the free verse writers back in the 80s. Mm-hmm. Thank God that's gone.
Yeah, seriously.
But that, of course, was in our workshop, in our MFA workshop. There were people who me, Lee, Harlan Behan, and I were pretty much the two formalists, and everybody else was it was like open warfare. And I learned from that how to disguise my formal poetry, through slant rhyme and through mixing up meter, but anyway. All right, so I wrote this poem because it was going to be, like here's my insult to my my nemesis in the workshop, and then of course it didn't work. It was a failed revenge because everybody loved the poem, even though it was so formalist. It's called Gowan's Rap, and there are internal rhymes. Each first and third line has an internal rhyme, and then it's A B A B, or A B C B. Whatever. Okay, you guys can see the way it looks. Gowan's Rap. Yo, my name is Sir G, and I got the energy to kill you, a giant green dragon, then rescue a girl down in the underworld before breakfast. I ain't even bragging. It was Saturday night, and we were partying right, Christmas at King Arthur's crib, when swoosh through the door stepped a great big horse, and the rider, man, he was a trip. He was green, ain't kidding you, greener than the back of a dollar, decked in emerald gauze like the Wizard of Oz. On his emerald horse he hollered, now who's tough enough to risk all his puffed Wheaties on a T9 to wager? Who'll strike me first? Baby, do your worst, then let me hit you back a year later. I thought, what the heck, so I took his green axe and twish, I decapped his head. But the jerk jumped right up and picked that thing up. I'll see you next year, chump, he said. Well, that's the end of my song, but don't get me wrong, next Yuletide I hang at Hulk's castle. I play with his wife and give him his life, then slide back here, Jack, no hassle.
That was great. That was Gawain's Rap. Thanks so much for sharing that. That's a great poem to end on. It's an example of, just a perfect example of your style, just having fun with poetry. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and that goes back to about 1986. So I've been doing it for a long time.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, yeah, thanks again, Vince. Really, really happy talking to you. It's been fun.
Okay, thanks, Tim.
Yep, good night.
Good night.
Well, and once again, that was Vince Gotera with his newest book, The Coolest Month. I'll put this on screen one last time. The Coolest Month. And he got Vince is also, we didn't get to talk about it, but he's also a guitar player. And I assume that's his own guitar on there. And then this is available from right there. It is Final Thursday Press. The best place to go, if I'm going to share a link, which I always like to do, is vincegotera.blogspot.com. And if you're wondering how to spell that, for those podcast listeners later, it's Vince Gotera, Gotera. And so vincegotera.blogspot.com is his website. So check him out and check out this book, The Coolest Month. And now before we move on to the open lines, there's a couple things I wanted to share. And if you look in the show notes, I added a couple links. So first of all, there's no show next week. And the reason there's no show next week is, I should have thought about doing this. So we have a live event. And so this doesn't really apply to everybody, but for the people in Los Angeles, we have a Poetry Day with Rattle up in Wrightwood, California, the mountain ski resort town. And there's a Sunday, December 19th, next Sunday. I'll be doing that, so I can't do the show. I'm just going to take a week off because I could use a break too after reading all these contest poems. But you can go to rightwoodarts.com and sign up if you're local enough that you can go. There's a workshop in the morning and then a poetry reading in the afternoon with a lunch break in between. The guests are Kathleen McClung, who was the winner of the last year's Rattle Chapbook Prize, one of the winners, and Michael Meyerhofer, who we publish all the time, a just wonderful poet. And so they're going to be leading workshops in the morning and then doing a poetry reading with an open mic in the afternoon. So come out and sign up for that. The workshops are $20 to attend, and there's a cap of 10 people. And we're following all the COVID guidelines for the county, which means like masks and things like that. So, and we'll do the reading outside, I think, but the workshops are inside. So anyway, that is the registration deadline is this Wednesday. And then, but if you're missing me and would like to see more of me, I have another link down here, which is to litmagnews.substack.com, which is Becky Touche's online magazine. She used to do the review. And now she has this really cool interview series where she's interviewing editors. And it's a fun thing. I like watching it because, like I mentioned earlier, I don't talk to editors much. I'm kind of a recluse. And so for me, it's really interesting to see how other people like go about the job I do. And so Quincy Lear was last week's guest. He's always fun. And then there's me next week, this Friday. If you would like to sign up, it's like a Zoom thing. So if you'd like to get the Zoom link, you can register there. That is Friday at, what time? It's after the critique of the week. Friday, where does it say the time? Let's see, I'll have to click on this. There it is, Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern time. So if you'd like to join in and talk more about Rattle and have me like on the opposite and answering questions instead of asking questions, then join us there. And one more thing, this is a really interesting opportunity. It's the last of these extra bonus links I put in the bottom, which is not something I usually do. But someone reached out to me and offered 2 free tickets to kind of promote this show. So this is Renaissance Heart. Let me put this on the screen as well. This is Stick Figure Productions, and it's another event in Los Angeles. So it only really applies to people who can get to Los Angeles. But this is presented by Red Hen Press. And Renaissance Heart is a, how do they characterize it? It's a new eclectic global music project that blends the multiple genres of jazz, world music, folk, and classical influence. And they have 2 Red Hen Press poets that are performing with them. They'll be reading poems interspersed. And it is Douglas Manuel and Francesca Bell, who you both know. Everybody should know who they are. We publish Francesca all the time. And she was on Rattlecast number like 17 or something. So they call it Poetry Coloring by the poets at Red Hen Press. You could buy tickets, but if anybody would like to go, the first person who asks for 2 tickets, there'll be tickets for you at will call. You do have to be vaccinated. So email me, tim@rattle.com, if you are interested. I know that the Rattlecast is all over the world and not just in Los Angeles. I don't know who's listening in Los Angeles, but I'm sure someone is. So the first person to ask for 2 free tickets to the show, you have to be vaccinated. It is October 2nd. Just email me, and I'll make sure I'll set that up with the person who offered them. So thanks. If you're interested, please do let me know. And now, those are the 3 links I wanted to share. And now we are going to go to the open lines. And for the open lines, how it works is that you email your poems to openmic@rattle.com. If you haven't yet, just email them there. Then I will call you up. You call me. So you can send me a chat message over Skype to Rattle Poetry, all one word. Just type hi, and I'll see you there, and that's how you get added to the call list. The other way is call in by phone, 818-850-7727. Just let it ring a few times, then hang up, and I will call you back when it's your turn. You just get in line that way. And so email your poem first to make sure I get it, and then talk to me one of those 2 ways. If you can't read it and you would like me to just read, just say so in your email, and I'll just read it for you too. That's another option, and always is. So that'll be the open lines in just a moment. I'm going to take a quick break, and I'll be right back as I set this stuff up. And I'm back. The funny thing is that my open mic at rattle.com account, apparently Google leaves you logged in exactly one week to the minute. So every time when I go to log in or when I go look at the open lines, it used to be up and then I'm automatically logged out. I have to type in my password during the middle of every single show. I'm going to have to like log out, then log back in later so that happens like later in the night at least. But that's happened like 6 shows in a row. Anyway, I am back into that account, and we're going to start out with a veteran like we usually do, just so you can see how it goes if you're new. And we have a bunch of new people, too. There's Bruce Need. There's an 802 number. There is a 646 number. There's Jerry Stephenson, who's going to be on Skype for the first time, I think. He's called before by phone. There's a 718. There's a 609. We got Mike Bales. We got Nivedita Karthik. We have Carla Schwartz. The first person to ask was Richard Westheimer. I'm going to call him up. And but just so you know, when I call you, there's a delay on the program. So shut off your stream or at least mute it so you're not seeing 2 of me at the same time from 2 different times. And also have your poem ready to read because you're not going to be able to see it because of that delay. So it's about a 30-second delay. So the part you're reading won't be what's on screen, and that doesn't work. So make sure you have your poem with you. And when I call you up, just mute or just X out completely of the stream wherever you're watching this, Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. Anyway, let's call up Richard Westheimer first, and then we'll move on down the list. Hey, Richard, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, Tim. Beautiful day here in Southwest Ohio.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Yeah, nice day here, too. Although I sprained my knee playing tennis, so I didn't get to play my softball league today, and I was really bummed, and I'm waiting for my text. I don't know if the team can win without me, but either my pride will be maintained or our winning record will be maintained. I don't know. We'll see. Gosh. But yeah,
quick recovery.
Yeah. I've been limping around for the last 2 days.
I tweaked my back a little bit hauling firewood, so we're each engaged in our.
Yeah, there you go.
Sports.
So what did you? I have the prompt poem first. Oh, I never said what the prompt was. Let me just tell everybody the prompt was to write an anagram, a poem that includes anagram in it, which is shuffling around the letters to make new words. And I got to read Megan's poem too. I just totally spaced out thinking about all that stuff. But I'll read Megan's poem after I read yours.
Oh, okay. So I have a PR poem, the We Who Stood in Silence, and anagram poem. Do you want just one?
Yeah, why don't you choose just one actually? Because I think we have a lot of people signed up.
Okay, I think I'll do the We Who Stood in Silence. The one I submitted for.
Okay, I have it. And this, do you want to tell what it was about?
Yeah. So actually, the poem was written 3 years ago. There was a mass shooting in Cincinnati 3 years ago this past Monday. So it sort of came up as I was looking at it. And I had just read an article about another mass shooting, right? You could use this poem every week, right? Mm-hmm. But this was the 3rd anniversary and there were lots of commemorations. And I attended the memorial, sort of the vigil the day after. And one of the religious people speaking misquoted Nehemiah 9:32, which I didn't know until I heard this line, and where did he get this?
Interesting.
And it's the repeated one of the repeated lines, and I forget what form this is. You'll probably know.
The villanelle looks like. Is that what it is? Yeah, I'm bad at remembering things.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's called We who stood in silence. And you'll see the line, it's the third line. The shots bled out in crimson pools. The priest intoned into the crowd. The awful, awesome God likes it not. We, the people, stood in mournful mood, short steps from the sorrowed place where those shot bled out in crimson pools. Their shattered bones, splattered flesh, arrayed like leavings from a warlord's feast. The awful, awesome God likes it not? Then why did the God put the gun in the hand of the man whose anger quaked and made him take the shots that bled out in crimson pools? We who stood there on the square held each other in our grief. We heard the awful, awesome God likes it not from the priest who speaks with a creamy voice of gifts of peace from some mighty king who just watched as those shot bled out in crimson pools. Who says the awful, awesome God likes it not?
Yeah, excellent poem. The refrains really work well. We who stood in silence. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And
Yeah.
I'm feeling embarrassed as a poetry editor that I can't remember if that's a villanelle or not.
Well,
It's been a long
I'm
weekend.
embarrassed as a poet who wrote it. It was
Yeah, I get those in like terts rimas, and I don't know. I just have to look it up every time. But anyway.
Thanks, Tim. You have a good one.
Yeah. Thanks, Richard.
Bye.
There's Richard Westheimer with We Who Stood in Silence. And I'm sure somebody in the chat is telling me what form that is. Let's see. No one's backing me up, so I have to just not know. So as I said, we're gonna have to do just one poem, I think, this week, because we got a lot of people lined up, which is great. So and it's already 6:41 or my time. So let's do Megan's poem, which I'd forgotten when I was trying not to forget. I was actually supposed to give out those free tickets last week, and I forgot. And so while I was making sure that I didn't forget this time, I forgot to do the prompt poem. And so the prompt, once again, which I'll put on screen here. Oops, wrong one. This is write a poem that contains an anagram. An anagram is created by rearranging the letters of a certain word or phrase to make another word or phrase. For example, an anagram of anagram is nag a ram. Bonus points if the title of your poem is part of the anagram. And so this was Megan's poem. Listen is an anagram of silent, and I haven't read this yet, but we'll see. Listen is an anagram of silent here. And this poem is listen. We were 9 in my friend's basement, playing with plastic Lion King figurines, making Mufasa fall off the bed, the cliff, over and over again, laughing at the way he skittered across the carpet floor when it happened. My friend's mother screamed. It wasn't a scream like when you see a spider the size of a kitten, or when you're watching a scary movie or a book falls from the shelf and you're sure it was a ghost. It was like when you get a phone call on an ordinary Tuesday evening and the voice on the other end says, "Regret to inform," and "your son," in the same sentence. And a sound like that makes you listen, even when you don't want to, even when it's the worst sound you've ever heard. My friend and I, we went silent, and it wasn't silent like when our teacher told our class one more word and you all missed recess while we shot looks at each other that said, "This is so unfair." This was the kind of silence that only happens when your friend is looking at you like everything that once made sense doesn't anymore. And Mufasa is on the floor, one blank eye looking up at us, and my friend goes downstairs and I stay there, listening, as family members spill in, and they're all wailing together, and I'm clutching Mufasa like I'm trying to save him, until somebody calls my dad to pick me up, and he pats my knee, and though it's dark now, he suggests ice cream. So we sit in his truck, and I lick my vanilla cone and listen to the coyotes howling in the distance, and remember how I used to think they sounded sad. So that was silent. Or listen. Listen. That was Megan's poem for the week. Listen. And very interesting. I wonder, there's 2 options. I don't even know which one that's about. So I'm curious. But that was Listen. I might have to ask her later. So now let's go back to the open lines. And oops, I didn't want to do that. Okay. let's go back to the open lines and let's call up Bruce Need over on Skype. Hey, Bruce, how you doing?
Hey, Tim, how are you?
I'm doing good. I don't know if you want to come in on video, but if you do, click the camera button so you come in.
Okay, hold
Okay.
on. Where's my camera button?
It's right next to the hang up and next to the mute on the bottom.
Hmm.
Well, if you don't see it, that's fine too.
Yeah, that doesn't really matter as long as you can hear me.
Yeah, it's all good. So what did you want to share?
The one I sent to you by email earlier today is called Journal Evening, Loving Near June,
Yeah, sounds good.
which is itself an anagram.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, there you go. So it's for the prompt. Is there anything else you want to say about it, or you just want to go right into it?
Well, I wrote this poem after reading some poetry by Peter Pereira. So there's a dedication to him there from his book called What's Written on the Body, and he has several poems that use anagrams and wordplay. So I was kind of inspired by that, and just a kind of a fun poem about summer that has about 16 or 17 different varieties of anagrams in it, and some other wordplay mixed in there. So it's just kind of fun to write.
Interesting. Yeah, looking forward to hearing this. Go ahead whenever you're ready. It's up for everybody at home.
All right. Journal Evening, Loving Near June, after Peter Pereira. Let the summer simmer, slice the melon and the lemon, watch as he takes the steak and grills it for the girls and boys. Oh boy, don't waste sweat on this afternoon. Raft on one lake or another, not hearing the hubbub. Laze with zeal, find a breeze and play on words, sword play on paper. Hang consonants, almost constant, on wind chimes. Let no one chide your whims. Jumble letters, add and subtract. We love solos. Let loose vowels in the air like fireflies. Life fries us enough. Let's relax, sell extra time, emit happiness, eat, drink, trade ink, write about summer, into the night thing that brings mosquitoes, so some quit to go inside, while we stand under stars, sure strands of sky we understand.
Excellent. Thanks so much for sharing. That was Bruce Need with a Journal Evening, Loving Near June. Thanks, Bruce.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, good night. Okay, let's see. So, excellent poem so far. Let's call up Jerry Steffenson. I think we've had him on the phone before, but not on video, so we'll see. Jerry, hello. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing good, Tim. How are you?
I'm doing great. You too, if you want to come on video, the camera button right there is something you have to hit.
My camera button is apparently not working.
That's strange. I wonder, yeah. Oh, well, that's 2 in a row, and we just couldn't get a connection. Maybe there's another technical difficulties day, and the internet.
It's probably me. I'm new to this.
Well, yeah, but you're not alone. It's been a problem all night. But anyway, we can just listen to the beautiful sound of your voice. And what is it that you wanted to share?
Well, the first one is I got your prompt for 100 years and the prompt for an anagram. So I put them in together in very few words.
Okay, cool. Yeah, these are both short. So why don't you, even though it's a 1-poem limit, let's just do both.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
It's called Tri-Po. Thinking nevermore, he goes back 100 years or more, never less than the best. Poetry, open and free. What a wonderful way for a poet to be.
Very nice. and what's this other one? Since that was so short, what is this other one? Melting.
This other one is called Melting, and it's a story, and I'll give you a quick background on it. When our daughter was about 3 years old, we got a kitten for her. The kitten had a problem with the Montcalm car, and it came to an end, and we had to explain this to our daughter. So 40 years later, I think I got the answer to the question, and Spillwords was kind enough to publish it for me the day before my daughter's birthday, when she was here visiting. But anyways, I'll read you Melting, if you would like.
Okay, and this is from spillwords.com. If you want to find it, spillwords.com/melting. Pretty easy URL, too.
Yeah, thank you. Melting, our daughter asked when a toddler, is that what death is? Now that here today, gone tomorrow approach resonates louder than most responses. Now she's a mother, and the questions will come. Melting now in my life makes more sense than most explanations, rationalizations, and holy stuff. Grasping this concept is somehow freeing. This I can visualize, it's even tactile, yet slipping away, yet still in present. Though a dozen years later, after being seasoned a bit more to death, or so we thought, we were proven incorrect. She, us, we, and I lost her brother. Maybe in a way we misplaced him, but he melted, and he does not come back. Now, miles down the road, I think of all the melted I've known. Family, friends, neighbors, casual acquaintances, all those loved ones. Now my always and ever so smart daughter will engage her daughter. They too will discuss melting. I trust the pros, the cons, the trek of grief, of hope and future. I know others who will melt, sadly before their time, at their time, or maybe past their best before date. Then one day I'll melt. Then I will learn the answer to her question.
Excellent. Very touching poem. Thanks so much for sharing that, Jerry.
You're very welcome. But I was trying to, after listening to your great interview with that guy, I thought, Jesus, I'm doing a death poem tonight.
Well, it's the most important topic. That's what we're all dealing with death. That's what we're doing in life. So,
a pleasure as always. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Jerry.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye. And you can see there, just really quick, his bio, Jerry is born and raised in the prairies of Manitoba, Canada, along the Red River and just south of Lake Winnipeg, then Alberta, and 10 years in the Rockies just above Montana. The last decade in the Canadian Gulf Islands. People, ideas, and stories set the stage of my poetry and writing. Music and art fill my days, and verse fills my head. And this is Jerry Stephenson's poem from this magazine, Where Words Matter, Still Words Press. So always cool to point out some other magazines and things too. Let's see. Next up, let's try a first-time caller. We're going to go with the 646. We'll see who 646 was. Well, 646 is not answering. Nope. Hey, this is Tim with Rattle Magazine. You are live on the air on the Rattlecast. Who am I talking to?
This is Lisa Finder.
Hey, Lisa. Lisa Finder?
Finder, yeah.
Finder, yeah. Thanks so much for sharing a poem here. What is it that you wanted to share tonight?
Okay, hello?
Yeah, oh, yeah. So shut off the stream in the background or mute it so you're not confused because there's a delay.
Okay. Okay, hi.
Hi.
So, are we okay?
Yep, we're good.
Me?
Yep, we hear you good.
Okay, great. Okay, so the poem is short, it's rhyming, it's called The Editor, actually a tribute to my brother, who's an editor, but I actually changed the pronoun. So, okay, The Editor. Erudite and perceptive, effective and receptive, preferring not to be mentioned, she diverts all attention to writers she's guided, perforce sometimes chided. She can even be ruthless if she finds a piece toothless. She's tactful yet impactful, values elegance and intelligence. She's reticent and wise, and will deny any credit for your Pulitzer Prize.
Sounds like a great editor there, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's it.
Great. Well, thanks so much for sharing that. The Editor. Yeah, thanks so much.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Yeah. Once again, that was Lisa Finder with The Editor. And let me put Lisa in our call phone book so we can know who it is next time. That's how I know whether you're a first-time caller or not, by the way, is if you're not in the phone book. Lisa Finder. And let's go to next. We'll try the, let's see. So we have a 7818 number. We have a 609. But I'm going to go back to the order they were received and call up Nivedita. Hey, Nivi, how you doing tonight?
Doing great, thank you. How about you?
I'm doing great. And how are things there?
Pretty good. Almost back to normal, I would say. So
That's really good. Glad to hear it. And what do you want to share? I think there's a unless they're short, there's a one poem limit tonight. Which one would you like?
that's totally up to you. One is probably it would take me 1 minute to read each poem, so you can take a call.
Okay. Let's do the loose goats and rams in Southfield, Michigan. That's just the one I had up. Lawn mowing goats. It's another funny story. Lawn mowing goats and rams escape through Michigan town. Do you want to explain a little bit what this was?
So apparently, some farmer there had let out his goats to some house there for helping them trim their grass. Because goats are their natural lawnmowers. And then they sort of escaped that house and went sort of on a rampage through town into people's houses they weren't supposed to go to and started eating their lawns as well.
Yeah,
so
I wish they would come over to my house. So we got a lot of weeds they could take care of. Okay, so let's hear this poem about it.
Landscape artist. Summer was almost done and it was time for the grass to get a trim. But she wondered, who's the one going to give in to my whims? She tried Jim and Tom and even Dick. Sadly, they were all overbooked. So this desperate chick just searched and looked and searched and looked. And then helped arrive in her hour of need from the most surprising place ever. She found a solution to her problem of weeds, and my wasn't that solution clever. She found the best landscape artist you ever did see, and as a bonus was told she would get some milk as well for free. But the artist was as temperamental as can be, and soon started pruning her ornamental bonsai tree. So she gently led him to the yard out back and decided to treat herself to a small snack. Some of the promised tasting milk. Oh, but what a fail, for she didn't realize the goat she had bought was a male.
Good punchline at the end there. Landscape artist. And yet, actually, now that you mention it, though, we have a bunch of fruit trees, and I wouldn't want them eating my fruit trees. And I, down the street, there's some people with a bunch of goats, and they climb trees.
See, everything. Basically, if it's there, it'll be eaten.
Yeah.
From the shirt on your so whatever it is.
Yeah, so I take that back. No goats in my yard. But thanks for sharing that, Nivi. Fun as always. I always appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yep. Have a good day.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
That was Nivedita Karthik with Landscape Artist. And let me see. Whose turn would it be next? Let me read Carlton Schwartz's poem. I think Carlton is next in line. And this was a Poet Respond poem. Let's see if there's details. Let's see. So this is my Poet Respond poem, and is the second poem. The title comes from 9/11 plus 20 years, 9/31. Interesting. And this is Carlton Johnson's 9/31 poem. Here we go. 9/31 by Carlton Johnson. Now we are here in this garden grove. Into a sunlit blue we spun and wove. Never before have we seen such loss. Even now, after 20 years, gray moss encroaches on memories. What do we do then? Live life in spite of the grief, the pain, enduring like the grassy ferns. Violence abounds. In the end we learn. Everything must go. Everything must change. No more the sky is falling. But indeed, life is strange. Excellent poem by Carlton Johnson, 9/31. And thanks for sharing that, Carlton. Let's see. Let's call up next. Let's try another first-time caller. And we'll try the 718. Then we'll go to Joseph Nolan after that. I think it's his turn next. And then Carlos Schwartz. That'll be the plan, if I remember it.
Hello.
Hey, this is Tim with Rattle, and you are live on the air on the Rattlecast. Thanks so much for joining us.
Okay.
Who am I talking to?
This is Phil Stern.
Thanks so much for joining us again, Phil. What did you want to share tonight?
Okay, there's been so much doom and gloom, especially this weekend. I'm going to share a poem that I wrote a little while ago. It's actually based on a line from a song I wrote many, many years ago, and it's about the need to listen to one another.
Sounds like a good poem for now. Yeah.
It's called "Let Us Sing to One Another."
Yeah, go ahead whenever you're ready.
Okay. Well, everybody brings baggage, carry-ons of events, concrete. For him, there was the earthquake when he was 11, when he came upon his birth certificate and learned that elders had kept secret an early death, weeks at a foundling home, a year of shuttling to hard-eyed aunts, and that the mother who made him breakfast that morning was not his mother. For her, there was a mother who abandoned her when she was 16, dying with only her in the hospital room, a mother who loved her, but who killed herself by neglecting cancerous signs. And then, at 19, a father who also abandoned her, hanging himself because he broke his arm and could not work and was convinced that he had cancer. Soon after they met, she came to see his need and sang to him. You're always saying you got to be hard, keep up your guard. Well, I'll be, you'll see, the softness in your life, a softness in your life. And soon after they met, he came to see her fears and sang to her. After we have a good day, you always say, don't leave me. Well, I say, you are strong, you are a survivor, but I'll stay. You'll see, I'll stay.
Very sweet poem. Thanks so much for sharing that, Phil. That was Let Us Sing to One Another. I'm curious, did you do a lot of songwriting before coming to poetry, or did you sort of do both together?
Well, I wrote poetry when I was very young,
mm-hmm.
and then I went into songwriting. I did that quite a while ago, actually. I'm an old geezer. I wrote in the 60s and 70s, and then I taught for a while in college, literature, English, of course, and just came back to writing poetry 5 years ago when I retired fully.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad you did, and thanks so much for joining us.
All right, thank you for letting me share.
Yep, good night.
Bye.
Yeah, that was Philip Stern with Let Us Sing to One Another, and let me add Philip into our phone book as well, so we know who it is next time. Okay. So I was looking at how many people we have in the phone book, by the way, and it was too many to count. So there's no easy way to count. It was hundreds, though. Okay, let me see next. Let's try this other first-time caller. This is a 609 number. I'm looking for new names on here so I can guess. Hey, this is Tim with Rattle, and you are live on the Rattlecast. Who am I talking to?
This is Bruce Neat again, Tim. I'm sorry about that. I must have called in twice.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, no problem at all. Thanks, Bruce.
Oh, by the way, great interview with my friend Vince Gotera tonight. I forgot to mention that earlier.
Yeah, it was fun talking to him. I don't get to talk to editors much, and it was cool to pick his brain and talk to him about all the things he does.
We actually became friends during the Poem a Day prompts in April several years ago. We became mutual admirers of each other's work, so it's kind of cool.
Oh, yeah, that is very cool. Yeah. Well, thanks. I'm glad you could join us today and share that poem and listen to Vince, too.
Okay, thanks again.
Yep, bye. Okay, so that was, let me put the just so we know who it is next time, too. That was Bruce Need. That's what happens if you call in and Skype. I can't tell the difference at first because the phone isn't labeled until I add you to the address book. Okay, so let's go instead to, let's go to Muhammad Al-Bawihi. And I think, did I see a poem though? Let's see. Oh, there it is.
Hi.
Hey, Muhammad, how you doing today?
I'm good, Tim. How are you?
I'm good. Do you want to push the camera button? I'm kind of curious if it'll work because it hasn't for a few people now. There you go.
Is it
Okay.
working?
Yep, it
Oh,
works
nice.
perfectly. Yeah.
Okay.
And you are still in your space station outpost.
Oh yeah, our Earth is still quite disturbing, so I'm staying here for a bit.
That's good. Yeah, I don't blame you. So what did you want to share tonight?
A short poem called "Into the Land of the Living." I emailed it just a short while ago.
Yeah, I have it right here. Is there anything you want to say before you read it?
This is for a lost loved one, my own daughter, actually.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you. May I read?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Darling, for you, I swam through solid rock, slept on a bed of air, and built you a house out of water. I walked a mile in the shoes of time, dove into the depths of the ocean, and took Poseidon's chariot for a spin. For you, I slowed down light, spun the earth the other way, moved the moon a little closer, and brought the sky to my cheeks. I crushed a planet between my fingers, took a sip of the glowing sun, traveled back in time, and swallowed a galaxy whole. I had tea with Adam and Eve, took a photo of the Big Bang, played catch with a dinosaur, and split the atom with my teeth. For you that I've done and more, would you now do one thing for me? Come back into the land of the living.
So touching. Thanks so much for sharing that. And I'm so sorry for having to, you have to write it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tim.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
Have a good night.
And you too. Good night.
Yeah, good night. Yeah, little teary-eyed on that one. Thanks for sharing that, Mohammed. That was Into the Land of the Living. And yeah, let's go now to, I don't know if I should say this, but yeah. So, I don't know if I should say. So Peter King Badger O'Donohue, who was on last week, he says he wants me to read this because he's too drunk right now to to read it himself. So here comes. This is Luciano Pavarotti's Eyebrows. Is that the right title? I think so. Okay. So here's the poem from Peter King Badger O'Donohue. And here we go. Luciano, hang on one second. Okay. Luciano Pavarotti's eyebrows go on holiday with James Brown's dentist. I got them good, dazzling. Jesus, that cat can sing. The muscles of his molars, the precision of his incisors. I love that man. But you too, shoe polished black, origami cut, collage inserted, kabuki cool, unperturbed by the sweat of Big P's brow. The dab and sweep of the white silk handkerchief is something to behold. Let's ditch the beach, hire a car, be two Louises and a Thelma, make a funk soul opera before breakfast. Excellent poem. Thanks so much for sharing that. And that was Peter King Badger O'Donohue, and it was PK. Was it PK the press that he runs? Let's see. Well, anyway, yeah, a great poem by Peter O'Donohue. Thanks, Peter. And let's call up Mike Bales next. Oh, I skipped Joseph Dolan. We'll get back to you, Joseph. Don't worry. We'll read Ted Guerrero's too. Okay.
Away from the laptop here.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, pretty good. How you doing tonight, Mike?
A little down. My Cyclones aren't playing too well.
Oh.
Iowa State.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah.
This is from my favorite news source, public radio, that I listen to a lot when I'm cruising around. It's got a little science tip to it. There's a remnant of a meteor discovered in some guy's driveway in Britain.
Oh, wow. Those things are valuable.
About that. Yeah, plus it's a carbon meteor, which makes it even more valuable.
Oh,
I guess it gives more hint about minerals in the universe.
Very interesting, yeah.
So this poem's called After the Sky Had Fallen.
After the Sky Had Fallen. Let me... Here we go. I found it.
Yeah, I just sent you one.
Okay.
After the sky had fallen, once in a void, remnants of universe, fireball flash, but are not consumed. A chunk of carbon and pieces gathered like seeds and petals of a flower from driveway and lawn, taken to be displayed on the main floor of the museum, contained remnants of frozen water, yield visions of oceans, stories of origins, and placed behind panes of plexiglass, and find new life as a wide-eyed child passes.
Oh, very cool poem and very cool story. Thanks for sharing that, Mike.
Okay, thanks for having me.
Yeah, always my pleasure.
Oh, Dora Malik, if you ever read her, she's a master of anagrams.
Oh, yeah.
She has a book called Stet, and I've read those poems over and over, and went, how can a person possibly do that?
Yeah.
The way she does anagrams in Stet.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I'll have to check that out. Yeah, thanks, Mike.
Okay, thanks. All right, bye.
Yep, bye. Yeah, that was After the Sky Had Fallen by Mike Bales. And let's call up, we have Joseph Nolan next. I think I saw Joseph Nolan. Oh, we have Carla Schwartz, too. Let's see, where'd Joseph go? There's Joseph. They're next to each other. I should have called them both earlier. You were way ahead on the call list, guys, but okay.
Hello?
Hey, Joseph, you're live on the air. How you doing today?
Good, Tim.
What is it that you wanted to share?
My poem is called What She Has to Say.
Yeah, do you want to say anything about it, or do you want to just jump right in?
Well, it's about the restriction of abortion rights recently with the law in Texas and the declining of the Supreme Court to hear that particular challenge.
Yeah.
So I'll just go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. It's up on screen for everybody now.
What she has to say. The burden of conception, the weight of birth and death, the way they are demanding on every beat and breath of hearts carrying light into flesh, and how they are encumbered by anchors set away down into the murky depths beneath the hopes of those who pray. A woman's forlorn decision to bear or hold at bay has become so painfully political. They don't want to hear anymore what she has to say.
Oh, very nice. Thanks for sharing that. That was What She Has to Say. I love the music as always. Thanks.
Thanks, Tim. Bye.
Yep, bye. That was Joseph Nolan with What She Has to Say. And let's see. Next we will go back down to Carla Schwartz. There she is.
Hi.
Hey,
Hi,
Carla. Yeah, how you doing tonight?
I am good, and I am going to get my poem here.
Okay,
Here
so
I
this
go.
was a prompt
Okay.
poem, I see.
Yes, it's a prompt poem. I have actually two short ones. I don't know if there's time for them.
Yeah, the other
They're-
one's really
they're-
short, so you could do the other one too.
Yeah. Okay. So the first one is called Hello World.
Okay.
And so the Hello World has historical in the computer language history that like in 1972 these guys wrote a program to produce Hello World on a computer screen.
Oh.
And then it's used now like as a test. Well, two ways. To teach people how to program very simply. It's like often the first thing they do when they're learning a program is to print Hello World on the screen. Okay.
Yeah, interesting. That's actually too what WordPress has. Like if you install a new WordPress installation, it says
Okay.
Hello World right there. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So it has history there. And so there's a bunch of anagrams that I wrote in here. They could be LOL, row held, doll howler, roll howled, rolled howl, world LOL. And then there's other words that you can find in here, like hollow, hollowed, red, led, hollowed, howled, whore, hero, and drew. Okay.
Interesting. Yeah.
But so I have a few of these words in here. Okay, many scattered throughout. Okay, the first screen software program, world down, low down, row on row of the hollowed machine machine's bee tongue held geeks like dolls the globe over, laughing LOL spelled out hello world unless it made a howler.
Oh, very good. Hello world. I like that. And then and what was the other one?
The other one, so I was looking up LOL because it's just so weird.
It is.
And it's not an expression that I really use. And by the way, B is a type of language that the first program was. It's a nickname for the language that the first program for Hello World was used. But anyway, and so I came up with this lonely old lumberjack comes up when you Google LOL.
Oh, interesting.
So, and an anagram for lonely old lumberjack is cloak, jumble, roll, deny. Okay.
Yeah. Wow.
So the lonely old lumberjack, cloaked in his sleeping bag, all a jumble on his bed, rolled off his mattress rack to start his day with a big fat lie. Deny, 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 deny.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Those are fun, tough anagram poems. Thanks, Carla.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.
Yeah, you too.
Bye.
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 That was Carla Schwartz with 2 anagram poems, the Cloak, Jumble, Roll, Deny, and Hello World. Thanks, Carla. And let's see, do we have anyone else to call? Let's, okay, so I'm going to read a few poems too. We have a little bit of time, almost out of time, but a little bit left. Let's see. So this is Ted Guevara's anagram poem. And if this, Ted says, Mr. Mycord has a simple anagram, maybe subtitle, but it's there. It's like Edwin Arlington Robinson's Richard Cory, probably one of the first poems we had to analyze or even memorize in high school. It sticks with me because it's so well-rounded, and the irony is just one of the best. Mr. Mycord, the culprit for the demise or reason to end things is more revealing. Maybe my next drafts of this poem is to hide that more. So here's Ted Guevara's poem for this week, Mr. Mycord. Here we go. Mr. Mycord. His pool is larger than his garden. The gardeners are swimmers themselves, taking summer jobs at his estate. He wants the best of people. Duke U nearby has the able stand-ins, determined, bright-eyed. Mr. Mycord couldn't be more pleased of the pick. They were like him at the prime of his youth. Devon had the physique, straight back, and the V-shaped torso. Annabelle had his grace, sensitivity, so finesse. His Juris Law father loved her. What built Mr. Mycord's mansion, column by column, brick by brick, is swine, often in cargo semis no one wants to drive behind. No one had speculated on Mr. Mycord's creed of avoiding smell. It didn't have the stamp of gold, the rate of hardship, or the frame of mind aimed by his mother. So one cool evening, when all his gifted hands had left, Mr. Mycord toasted his Marlowe to the sun beyond the pool, and hang himself down the balcony by a cord. Tim, diligent, keen Mr. Mycord, witnessed from afar the silence, the jump. Interesting, Mr. Mycord. That was Ted Guevara's poem for the prompt, Mr. Mycord. And thanks, Ted. And now let's see. So we have I think we have a little tiny bit of time. And Carlton Johnson asked if I could do the anagram poem instead, but I didn't see that note in time. So let me read Carlton Johnson's anagram poem too, and then I'll read Nivedita's as well, and then that'll close up the show with a little saiku too. And here we go. This is Carlton Johnson's anagram poem. Is this the ends of everything, or is Ed's 17th a horny fight? An anagram poem by Carlton Johnson. This should be interesting. I think these are all big anagrams. The invitations for his 70th were posted 6 months ago. Among the invitees, a sexpot, a moth, a dingo. Folks all gathered for Ed's big birthday bash, or as he would say it was, a grabby bit high dash. Ed came dressed in a full Scottish tartan, complete with kilt and sporran, and even a tam, a placement Roth kit tilt. The haggis was served on soda crackers lacquered with fine scotch, a cracker's sudden verso. A troop of merry pipers, drummers, and fiddlers played a fashion of jigs and reels. Unframed Mrs. Diddler parlayed Ed, past his prime, still fancied himself a bit of a ladies' man, dancing and romancing the sense of so malady fan. Those gathered rolled out a huge 17-layer cake, complete with chocolate and almonds, no tea cake, evenly sneer. After 3 a.m., the drunken and the besotted all stumbled out of the tavern, a drunken town mumbled. In the end, Ed gathered his tam, his birthday cards, and left the inn singing to a wee dram cab stand, dryly theft, of Ed's last remaining charms, of Mrs. Diddler, a stolen kiss, his true love departed, he wandered home, derided, first rolls miss. Interesting. Anagram poem. That is a lot of work. Thanks very much for sharing that. Those are a lot of anagrams you came up with, Carlton. Really wonderful stuff. And let me do Nivedita's really quick. This is the anagram prompt that she had, so I'm curious to see this. The woman in the red dress. And here we go. This is Nivedita Karthik once again. Since we do have a tiny amount of time, I always want to end these by a little over 2 hours. The woman in the red dress. I see a woman dressed in red. That woman is me. And the dress that is the red that I wear when I wish to die, when I wish I was dead, as red as the address in this dead head. I see a woman dressed in red. That woman is me, and the dress that is the red that I wear when I wish to hide, when I am sad, as red as the address in this hidden me. I see a woman dressed in red. That woman is not me. So there's Nivedita Karthik's excellent anagram poem, The Woman in the Red Dress. Thanks, Nivi. And let us see. So, another one here. Let's do Vicky Miko. We'll finish out with this one, then the Saiku. So there's a news story here. So this, I think it's a combination of things, I think, for this poem from Vicky. It's an anagram with a news story to go along with it. And the news story here is researchers are closer to unraveling the mystery of science behind regeneration. And then talking about salamanders. Now a team of scientists led by James Goodwin of a MDI biological laboratory in Bar Harbor, Maine, has come a step closer to unraveling that mystery with the discovery of differences in molecular signaling that promote regeneration in the axolotl, a highly regenerative salamander, while blocking it in the adult mouse, which is a mammal with limited regenerative ability. So this story goes on, and this is Vicky Miko's poem here, the anagram poem number 100, or for this episode. And there's this quote at the beginning: "We need to know exactly what salamanders do and how they do it well, regenerate limbs and organs, so we can reverse engineer that into human therapies." And that's what a quote from James Godwin from that article. The newt, a curious little night thing. Half eaten by a boorish beast, the newt emerged a sticky baste of spit and piss regrown inside the phagosome. And so, let's see. The newt went missing for days and nights to heal. This is like blocking. I think this is just my. Let me see. Let me start over reading this one because the picture was blocking the text in the preview mode. So let me do it this way. Okay, we'll do it like that. The newt, a curious little night thing. Here we go again. And I'll say phagosome the right way I get this time. Half eaten by a boorish beast, the newt emerged, a sticky baste of spit and piss regrown inside the phagosome. The newt went missing for days and nights to heal its toes and snout, warming itself on the portico light. Bubbling, boiled the beast, ladled from a bone tureen, steeped in wine and roasted corn. The newt then ate the mealy feast. And for those just listening, we're getting these photographs from Vicky is She always does, and this is a newt up on the light, the shadow of a newt on the side of a house. And that is the newt. Excellent excellent poem, and great pictures as always, Vicky. The other one was the newt itself on the side of the lamp post light next to the house. And then the newt, a curious little night thing. Thanks, Vicky. And okay, so that is going to be it for the show. Let me do the haiku really quick. And this haiku that was based on this article from here we go. This is from Science Daily. The warming climate is causing animals to shapeshift. And I read this article. I thought, wow, that's interesting. Climate change is not only a human problem, animals have to adapt to it as well. Some warm-blooded animals are shape-shifting and getting larger beaks, legs, and ears to better regulate their body temperature as the planet gets hotter. And then it goes on to talk about how all these birds are evolving bigger beaks, and Allen's law about how appendages of animals get bigger as a way of managing heat so they can stay cool, because that's the main place that heat escapes their body is their limbs. And so elephants have big ears and things like that, and birds have bigger beaks when it's hotter. And the lead author here even goes on to say that where was it? It was she says prominent appendages such as ears are predicted to increase, so we might end up with a live-action Dumbo in the not-so-distant future. And so I read this, and it was a very interesting article. Then I went to the actual article in Cell. What was it in? Cell Press was the original publisher of this, and this is shape-shifting, changing animal morphologies as a response to climatic warming. And I was left it's a little bit hyperbolic, I think, based on the actual evidence that they have here. They do a survey of some of the literature, and like just for example, there was one study that looked at 5 species of birds in Western Australia, and they found that beaks are increasing in size over the last 150 years, but 3 of the 5 were tied, can be correlated to temperature in the previous years they were born, basically, and 2 weren't. So the causation link there is really weak, actually, in this article, I felt. And so my haiku was about that. And I also used, since I didn't write a prompt poem this week again, I used the prompt of an anagram as well. And chic poison is an anagram for the last line too. So here's my tiny haiku. Chic poison, a bird's beak grows faster than Pinocchio's. Chic poison, a bird's beak grows faster than Pinocchio's. That is your haiku for the week. And that is it for the show. Thanks, everybody, for joining me. It was a real pleasure talking to Vince and sharing all these wonderful poems on the open lines. And don't forget, if you live in the LA area, we have 2 events. We have free tickets to a musical thing in the show notes. We also have the Poetry Day. I know most people aren't in LA, so I'm kind of curious if announcing here has any impact, because I don't even know who's listening in LA. And when you look at the podcast, like you see all the downloads, a lot of people listen to it and the different platforms, but I have no idea who they are. There's not a lot of tracking. So I'm curious to see if anybody actually listens to this in LA who will pick up those free tickets. And I'm also curious to see if anybody will show up to the Poetry Day coming up next week. But like I said, next week we have no show, but you can find me on that LitMag News interview if you'd like on Friday. And the next guest we're going to have is 2 weeks from tonight. And the next guest is going to be Deborah P. Kalaji. Deborah is just a wonderful haiku poet. She's the leader of the Southern California Haiku Group, a prominent feature of the haiku community. She also, speaking of Wrightwood and these Poetry Days, when we had the Literary Festival in Wrightwood, she did a haiku hike, which was the most popular thing that we did. So every year she would go out and go on a hike through the woods with people and teach them haiku. And she's just great about haiku. She's also tied very much like Vince today to the Science Fiction Poetry Association and does a lot of science fiction poetry things and has some other projects going on she'll be sharing in addition to this book. So it should be really fun talking to Deborah P. Kalaji, and that is Sunday, September 26th, 2 weeks from tonight at the regular time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Hope to see you then. Hope you have a great night, and I'll talk to you soon. Good night. Oh, wait, I'm not going to go yet because I didn't do the next week's prompt. So hang on a second. Next week's prompt is going to be here. Next week's prompt is, you've been driving for hours on a long, empty stretch of highway. It's miles and miles of nothing but desert landscape, no rest stops, no gas stations. Just when you're starting to think you'll never see civilization again, a building comes into view. What is it? Write a poem about it. That is your prompt. You're driving through the desert, forever, no gas stations, no nothing, then a building appears. What is it? Write a poem about that building. That is next week's prompt, and like I mentioned, next week's guest is going to be Deborah P. Kalaji. And not next week, 2 weeks from now. That is going to be Sunday, September 26th at the regular time, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific, Rattlecast number 111. And I will see you then. Hope you have a good night.